Earlier this week, we brought you an interview with a challenger to Senator Tom Cotton's seat in Washington.
That's right. And today, Channel 7's Beth Hunt had the chance to sit down with Senator Cotton to talk about a number of the biggest issues facing Arkansans. Take a look.
Let's get started. I'd like to begin with the Recisions bill that actually just passed in the Senate early this morning. You supported this bill. It would revoke $9 billion in previously approved funding for foreign programs, foreign aid programs, and public media. A point of contention were the cuts to local radio, TV stations, especially in rural areas. There are a lot of people who rely on those to get emergency messages and free programming. What do you say to people who live in those rural areas who are concerned about losing that?
Well, Beth, I think for too long, PBS and NPR at the national level have been politically biased. They've put out, in some cases, rank propaganda or false information. So this has been a long time coming. That said, our local stations only get a pretty small fraction of their budget from those national PBS and NPR accounts. So I think they're going to be just fine and continue performing some of the important services they provide for Arkansans. I think it's important at the same time that we respect and protect and be good stewards of Arkansas taxpayers. Now, the vast majority of that $9 billion is in foreign aid programs, which are frankly not appropriate, and they don't advance America's interests. Things like Sesame Street in Iraq or transgendered surgeries in Peru or Nepal or what have you. Arkansas taxpayers don't want their hard-earned tax monies going to support those things, and they really don't even advance America's national security interests. Now, we did protect vital, life-saving health programs, for instance, in which we provide, say, medicines or vaccines to poorer nations overseas. But a lot of that money, I think, is much better spent on other priorities or going back to help address our very large deficits.
Another bill you supported, the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, is now law. It is massive, nearly 900 pages. What are some of the items in there that you really think are going to improve the lives of Arkansans?
Well, it is a very big, beautiful bill, and obviously it got some parts of it got a lot of attention when we passed it. Say, the biggest tax cut in American history, making tax rates stable and permanent for Arkansans, cutting taxes on tipped workers or on overtime, giving a tax cut to Arkansas seniors who are on Social Security. But there's a lot more to it than that as well. For instance, we have $150 billion in defense spending, which is going to help the men and women of our National Guard. It's going to help all those Arkansans who work in our defense industry in places like South Arkansas outside of Camden. The bill also includes a farm bill, the Bozeman Farm Bill, if you will, since Senator John Bozeman chairs the Agricultural Committee. For the first time in 7 years, we've been able to overcome a Democratic blockade. We've been able to update the Farm Bill to take account the runaway inflation that farmers, ranchers, and foresters face in the Biden administration. At the same time, we've imposed new work requirements on food stamps and recipients, and making sure that everyone who needs assistance gets it, but also is working to get back on their feet and get back off of public assistance. So as you say, it's a big, beautiful bill. It contains many, many provisions that didn't get all that much attention in the news, but are going to make a real difference for Arkansas and our taxpayers.
You mentioned some things getting a lot of attention. You also mentioned SNAP. I want to talk about real quick the changes to Medicaid, the cuts to the SNAP program. Hundreds of thousands of Arkansans rely on these programs, and we've heard from a lot of them who are fearful of losing those benefits. What would you say to those Arkansans to sort of reassure them?
Well, first off, Arkansas, thanks to Governor Sanders and our legislature, has actually implemented a lot of these reforms already in our state. Things like weekly work requirements or periodic eligibility verification. So I don't expect it to affect the recipients of programs like Medicaid and food stamps in Arkansas nearly as much as it benefits Arkansas taxpayers, because we're not going to be subsidizing liberal Democratic states that have much lower standards and much higher rates of use of Medicaid, and especially food stamps, than does Arkansas. Arkansas has one of the lowest food stamp rates in the country. So I think most Arkansas taxpayers will be pleased that now all Americans who are on Medicaid or who are on food stamps, who are grown men and women without young children and who are able-bodied are going to show that they're working. It's not even a 40-hour work week, it's a 20-hour work week to earn those benefits. So I think on balance, it's very good for Arkansans, for our taxpayers who support those programs, and for the beneficiaries of Medicaid and food stamps who genuinely need it, who are the genuine targets of support from those programs. They're going to continue to get the benefits they need.
Let's move now to the war in Ukraine. President Trump recently decided to resume weapons shipments to that country via NATO. This is sort of a shift in his approach to the war there. I wanted to get your thoughts on it and the possible implications of that.
Well, I don't think it's so much of a shift for President Trump as it is taking up one strand of the policy that he announced in his first term when he was the one that provided Ukraine, for instance, with all the weapons like the anti-tank missiles that they used in early 22 to fight off Russia's invasion in the very first days. And he said throughout the campaign that he wanted peace. He wanted to end this war. He hoped he could end it on day one. But if Russia refused to end its unprovoked war of aggression, that he would continue to support Ukraine as it fought for its survival. And he gave Vladimir Putin a lot of runway here. For several months, he tried to bring him to the negotiating table. He made clear that this war is probably only going to end in some kind of negotiated settlement. But Vladimir Putin, as he has said, is not very serious about it. He uses nice language with President Trump, and then he bombs another city and kills more kids in Ukraine. So President Trump, I think, made the right decision for national security, made the right decision for American jobs to sell more of the weapons we produce to our NATO allies who can then turn them over to Ukraine, and to put Vladimir Putin on the clock to say, you only got about 50 days here to come to the negotiating table before we're going to ratchet up the pressure even more with sanctions on Russia and sanctions on some of Russia's main trading partners. I think this is the right decision that President Trump has made in America's national interest. I commend him for it, and I support it.
I listened to an interview that you did earlier this year where you said the war in Ukraine exposed the depletion of our weapons stockpiles. Some call it a munitions crisis. And you've been a vocal advocate for rebuilding and strengthening the U.S. military stockpiles. So talk about that priority, what the solution is, and the role that Arkansas, specifically South Arkansas, might play in it.
The war in Ukraine didn't cause our munitions crisis, but I think it exposed the munitions crisis, made clear just how brittle supply chains are when it comes to making fairly basic munitions, like the Standard missile that our Navy uses, that was used in part in some of the recent engagements in the Middle East, or 155 millimeter rounds for artillery cannons, the most basic kind of artillery shell in the Western world. So the Big Beautiful Bill contains $150 billion for our military to help rebuild it after the lean years of President Biden's tenure. And a lot of that will go to accelerating production of critical munitions in places like the Highland Industrial Park in South Arkansas, just outside of Camden. We can get this done. If companies know that there's going to be a demand for those munitions from our government as well as from our foreign partners, they can invest. They can add more workers, they can add more lines, they can add more shifts. But that demand has to be there. And this bill, by including all that money for many years to come, I think it's a strong signal to our defense industry that unfortunately it's a dangerous world out there still. And there's more than ample opportunity to make smart investments in increasing production rates for missiles, for rockets, for missile interceptors, and for other kinds of munitions. And Arkansas is going to play a huge role in protecting our nation, helping our allies, which is going to bring more jobs and economic growth to our state.
We'll have more of that later this week as well. Coming up, we'll hear how summer learning is critical for student success.
Stay with us.